Okay, continuing on in chapter 2. The way of Balaam and the way of Cain. Typically in the New Testament, Balaam's doctrine and way is associated with the way of Cain. Jude 1:11 and 2 Peter 2:15 and 16. The way of Cain represents a fundamental rejection of God's method of justification, rooted in a self-righteous desire to be approved by God through one's own works. This mindset manifests as a religious facade that conceals a deep-seated hatred for those who are justified by faith alone. Amen. When Cain's offering was rejected, his countenance fell, signifying a hardening of his heart against God's way of justification. Genesis 4:5-7. This fallen countenance is indicative of a spiritual condition that leads to accusing and persecuting those who take refuge in the blood of Christ. In this context, understanding the reference to Satan's seat in Pergamos becomes crucial. At its core, Cain's way is characterized by vainglory and self-seeking. It is a religious spirit that seeks honor and approval based on one's own righteousness rather than resting in the finished work of Christ. Amen. This attitude inevitably leads to hatred for those who are justified by faith, as their very existence serves as a testimony against the self-righteous efforts of the religious. As the Apostle John writes, not as Cain, who was of that wicked one, and slew his brother. And wherefore slew he him? Because his own works were evil and his brother's righteous. 1 John 3:12. The way of Cain finds expression in the clergy laity system that began to emerge in the early church. This system, which exalts certain individuals above the congregation, is rooted in the same spirit of vainglory and self-righteousness that motivated Cain. Sorry, my cat's got the zoomies and playing with her birdie ball. Sorry. This system, which exalts certain individuals above the congregation, is rooted in the same spirit of vainglory and self-righteousness that motivated Cain. As it developed, it became intertwined with the doctrine of Balaam, teaching God's people to compromise with the world and weaken their spiritual vitality. This unholy alliance between religious self-righteousness and worldly compromise serves to undermine the true doctrine of Christ and justification by faith alone. Those who walk in the way of Cain often present themselves as defenders of righteousness, but their actions reveal a hatred for God's people and his method of justification. They accuse the saints, seeking to exclude them from fellowship based on their own arbitrary standards of righteousness. This accusatory spirit is evident in their constant focus on the sins and shortcomings of others, rather than on the sufficiency of Christ's sacrifice. As Paul warns, beware of dogs, beware of evil workers, beware of the concision. Philippians 3:2. Amen. Referring to those who would impose their own righteousness on others. While there have always been pockets of genuine believers throughout church history, represented by the treasure and the hidden pearl, precious in God's sight, the outward form of Christianity has been populated early on by the fowls who steal the seed of the word from those who do not understand it, sow bad seed and antichrist doctrines in its place, and work to build up Satan's kingdom, which is a counterfeit and a caricature of God's. This is what the world sees when they think of Christ and the word of the truth. No wonder it can be so difficult to see the gospel make headway when we have this kind of representation to overcome. Amen. The way of Cain, characterized by self-righteousness and a rejection of God's method of justification, finds its ultimate expression in the institutionalization of false worship systems. This connection becomes evident as we examine the letter of the church in Pergamos, which addresses the concept of Satan's seat. Amen.